names that I have to go through. Not a lot of time, so I better be on time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Electricity Nightclub. Welcome back to another survey. We're going to discuss some of the greatest masters in the history of the world today in the nightclub. By the way, if you haven't met me already, I know you did, but just for the sake of it, my name is Albert. I'm your art director, and I'm Shanir on board. I come all the way from Croatia, a beautiful country in the heart of Mediterranean. Like I always say, it's jewel and gem of Europe. Now I take great pride that I am from Croatia. Also take great pride in representing a gallery called Arquest Gallery. We are in business for 48 years already, and we are reputed to be the largest private young gallery in the world. And in fact, I would like to interject something quickly, and then we're going to start with a survey. We have the largest collection of master artworks, by the way, of the graphic works of art by Rembrandt and Chagall and Picasso and Goya and many other more as well, by sheer size, not paintings, graphic works of art. Obviously, paintings you would not come across on these on the ships, and obviously wouldn't do so well. Obviously, may be destroyed and all that. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the first artist, ladies and gentlemen, Rembrandt von Rijn. How many of you heard for artist Rembrandt? I'm curious. All right, we live on planet Earth. His name is one of the greatest in the history of art world. He is born in 1606 in Leiden. He passed away at 1669. He didn't live a very long life, but he was a very prolific painter, one of the greatest that we know in history. Now, his father was actually, he had a grease mill on the Rhine River. Now, just to give you a little bit the explanation about behind his name, his father was Hermann Gerritz. Rembrandt's full name is Rembrandt Hermsson, son of Hermann von Rijn. They had a grease mill on the Rhine River. His father was a miller, his grandfather was a miller, his great-grandfather was a miller. There was a long lineage of millers in this family. He was 8 of 9 children. He was brilliant, to say at least. At the age of 14, he enrolled in Leiden University. He didn't spend much time over there because the very next year, he actually started with an apprenticeship with a minor painter in Leiden, Jacob van Swenberg. He was not a very great painter, however, he had an influence on Rembrandt because it was custom for artists to actually go to Italy as an educational excursion, and then he would actually bring those techniques and ideas from Renaissance, and that actually had an impact on him. Didn't spend much time with him because the very next year he spent time and he began an apprenticeship with a great artist of his time. His name is Peter Lastman. Peter Lastman was a very great painter in Amsterdam. He actually shared the techniques with Rembrandt that he never completely forgot. In fact, one of the greatest things that he learned from him is chiaroscuro. Now, I must say, the literal translation of chiaroscuro in Italian means clear and obscure, light and dark, delineation of light and dark in the artwork. Now, in art of Rembrandt, his principal style or stylistic device, one would say, was light. He was portraying light with incredible precision. In fact, the portraying light in his artwork was a visual equivalent of art of painting. In fact, this is how great was he in portraying that art, that light, I should say. It was profoundly analogous. Michelangelo Medici da Caravaggio, or we know it Caravaggio, in late 1500s, he started with the chiaroscuro techniques, those light and dark contrast in works of art. Rembrandt learned those techniques. He elevated to the level that is still standard to this day. No one advanced upon actual potential in the compositions of when portraying light after Rembrandt. He is one of the most precise painter of light. Well, before Thomas Kincaid, I must say that as well. Now, he actually was a very success from the get-go. I have to say his life can be divided in 2 parts. It is a steady, almost geometrical rise. He was an apogee of very fine art. He is in artistic apotheosis when he was actually in his fame. He was a portrait painter, the greatest in Europe, in demand, a great demand. Even Queen of Sweden resorted to bribery to get a portrait from this master. And there's also one thing that must be noted about his artwork and his style. He had the ability ability to paint with such great empathy. He understood human emotion and human foibles, and actually he had the ability to portray this with incredible precision. Even till this day, this is one of his greatest and finest legacy in his artwork, because he understood human emotion on an unprecedented level. Now, as we move on, I will actually share with you that a lot of tragedies befallen him. He had a tumultuous life. Obviously, in 1640, his mother has passed away. As I said, he was eighth of 9 children. 5 of his brothers as well has passed away up to 1640. He married in 1634. From 1635 to 1641, his wife, Saskia, had 4 pregnancies. 3 of these 4 children has passed away virtually at birth, less than 1 month. There is only one son who lived to be a grown man. His name was Titus. 1642 also marks the year when his wife Saskia has passed away. 4 pregnancies in 6 years. Obviously, her body couldn't take it. She died from a bloody tuberculosis. Not only that, he actually found another woman, a companion, spent 9 years with her. Her name was Henrique. She also has passed away when plague ravaged and pillaged in Netherlands. Not only that, in 1656 he actually declared bankruptcy, lost everything that he had, didn't have a dime to his name. He was emotional destitute, social recluse, didn't have a penny to his name. When he passed away, before he passed away, his son Titus, the only that actually lived to be a grown man, he also has died. And then when he passed on, he was buried in an unmarked grave. That is the life of one of the greatest artists in the history of the world. It can be divided in 2 parts, rise and then a significant reversal. Now, obviously, those reversals enable him to actually paint with greater empathy, but obviously, no tragedies will produce Rembrandt. There's only one Rembrandt. He was a genius well before these tragedies occurred. Now, I must say that his portraits is something that is with us, and something that is still studied till this day, and he shifted paradigms a few times how the portraits were painted. I will show you one example. This is one of his masterworks of art. This one he painted in 1632. It's called Anatomy of Dr. Nicholas Tulp. Now, I must say, Franz Hals, who was a very great artist at the time, he would paint civic portraits, group portraits, obviously. You didn't have a camera back in those days. You would create group portraits. He was painting very innovative group portraits since 1616. But they were different. They were completely different in style and meaning, in size. There was a type of camaraderie that one can actually be a place, one is more fitting for fraternal banquets, if you would. Now, what would be specific about this? Every single sitter would individually come and visit with an artist in his studio. He would create sketches, he would create studies of them, and then he would actually assemble them into composition. If you look at over here, all of these men are posing in a way. Now, Rembrandt, he would actually enact something completely different. He would actually create a scene where everyone is actually involved. We are also actively participating in the scene. It was incredibly innovative and imaginative, very creative. Now, this is a painting that marked obviously an event, exaltation of Dr. Nicholas Tulp. It was actually it was given to a position of a head of a surgeon guild. And then they would invite an artist, as young Rembrandt, he actually had that honor. Every single sitter would come in Rembrandt's studio, they would sit down, he would create sketches, he would create studies, and he would concoct the idea on the canvas. This is what he would create. Incredibly fascinating. No one had ever seen anything like it before that. Now let me quickly explain this composition to actually understand this with great precision. Dr. Nicholas Tulp over here is performing the anatomy lesson. Must also be noted, in the 1600s in Netherlands, they would actually have public trials. They would also have public executions. If, for example, you're a murderer or you would steal something, when you would be executed, that would be obviously well attended. People like those kind of things. They would find that as a great bit of fun in those days. And then it would then use the cadaver. The body would be used for public anatomy lesson, which was also well attended. And this is one of those events over here. Now that did not really happen, obviously, but there were certain moments that those things would occur. Over here you have Dr. Nicholas Tulp over here. He's using cadaver, a great diagonal over here. We see that's the compositional chord, the focal point that actually surrounding the cadaver. Now what you're actually going to see is giving the anatomy lesson. Those three people, three persons over here, they're very vested into the actual lecture, but they're not actually looking over here what's happening. They're looking at this book. If you look at it in foreshortening, you're going to see the actually anatomy book. They're comparing what they see over here. These two people over here in the background, they're looking straight at us. We interrupted the scene. They're looking at us. We are active participants in this composition. And over here, these two people more than likely are watching the actual book. This is something no one ever seen before that. Over here, this gentleman actually holding the names of every single of the person in the portrait. Obviously, they would pay equal amount. Each of them would pay equal amount. Be in a portrait over here, their names are over here. Now, also, there's one more thing as well. Any doctors in the room? I'm curious. Any doctors in the room? Well, you don't really have to be a doctor. It's kind of quite logical. If you have an anatomy lesson or an autopsy, do you think they actually start with dissecting the arm? Not in 10,000 years. They will start with eventual cavity, with big organs, and then they go from there. Now there's a little bit of symbolism, obviously. If you are a head of a surgeon guild, what is his primary tool for existence? It's an arm, and also an artist's hand is also a primary tool of his existence. So he actually did inject a little bit of symbolism in this work of art. Now, second time that he actually changed and shifted paradigms was when he painted his magnum opus, his opera prima, and that is a very great painting called The Night Watch. I'm curious, have you not seen The Night Watch? It's in the Challag Museum. It is a very fine, one of the most famous painting in the history of the world. It is enormously big. Now, when we look at this composition, there is seeming disarray, seeming lack of compositional structure, but that's not true. After further examining this artwork, we actually can discern it is a very smartly comprised composition. Now, first and foremost, it's a group portrait. Obviously, 18 sitters came to his studio to actually have a portrait done of them. He would then place them in the outdoor scenes. It was the first time ever that we can see a group portrait painted in the outdoor scene. Now, what we see over here, Franz van Gogh, William de Ruyterberg, the main protagonist actually, he's portraying a pictorialization of militia. Now, though the war was coming to an end, they still had the militia, and the only thing that they would perform was a night watch. Now, we will explain the name. It's actually a little bit counterintuitive, but I will explain this as we move along. You're going to see over here, each of these people in this composition paid an equal share as these two people. Obviously, but they don't share a same amount of limelight. But if you look closely, Rembrandt actually used different tools to focus our attention on those sitters. You're going to see a pole, a flagpole as well, or you're going to see over here a drum, and actually focuses our attention to the sitter. It is a very, 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 very large painting. Obviously, you can actually get the attention very, very easily. Now, anyone been to Amsterdam, by the way? Anyone been to Amsterdam? You've been to Amsterdam? Have you seen it as well? Have you seen any arch, the triumphal arch in Amsterdam, by the way? There is none. He actually invented over here. He placed a triumphal arch over here in the background. People were enamored, surely, when they seen it, because why would it be there? It was obviously a representation of the city. They are guarding over here. Now, the light is arbitrary in the composition, but over here you're going to see this young girl has an incandescent radiant light source that is very difficult to be explained. Now, I must say, this artwork was painted in 1642, which coincided with the death of his wife Saskia. It is unanimously agreed upon that he actually painted this young girl. She's carrying a fowl over here, which is a representation of the militia, that when his wife Saskia passed away, that he changed the facial features into his wife Saskia, actually paying homage to his beloved wife. He also placed himself in the background. If you look at over here, it's a self-portrait. He was a very prolific, prodigious self-portrait painter. No one minded, obviously. He was a great Rembrandt. He placed himself in a portrait. Well, why not? Though reluctantly, because we have so many things that I need to discuss today, we will move on from his paintings on a longer cruise, and I would dedicate the entire lecture to Rembrandt, obviously, because there's so many things to say. I must say, what was his greatest legacy is not actually in painted form. His greatest legacy is a medium of etching. Etching is something that he did not invent. However, he was the greatest etcher that ever lived. His genius would seldom be matched, never surpassed. Even 400 years after, his genius has never been surpassed in a medium of etching. Now let me explain this quickly. I'll give you a little 50-cent explanation how etching is being created so you can actually get an idea. The artist would take a plate, copper or zinc would be used, something malleable, something soft, something pliable. Then he would take 5x8 plate normally is used, and he would cover it with acid-resistant ground. Beeswax, resin, and tar would be used, as long as it's acid-resistant. And then he would take an etching needle and he would draw the design into the plate. He would not remove any portions of the plate. Makes sense so far? He's just drawing the design, removing the wax. In reverse as well, as lithography I explained yesterday, when it's printed, it's reversed, it's mirrored. It's like ambulance. I give you the analogy. You see it right to left, it's convoluted. You see it in the rearview mirror, it says ambulance. Same gist. So he's painting and drawing, the design in reverse. When he's happy with the design, he takes the plate, he submerges it in the acid bath. Now, acid would bite the lines where the plate is exposed. The longer you keep it in the bath, the deeper it's going to be the line. Deeper the line, more ink can hold, the darker the color. When he's happy, he takes the plate out, wipes the plate clean off that acid-resistant ground, then he takes an ink roller, rolls the ink on top of the plate, wipes it clean again. Now, ink only settled in those ink wells, in those incisions. Makes sense so far? Yes? Fantastic. Then he takes a moist sheet of paper, places it on the top. It has to be the watered-down paper because it's going to go through a high-pressure printing press, obviously, so you don't want to crush in the paper. Paper crushes it, collects the ink from the ink well, and on the other side of it, you have a mirror image impression of what he has created. Simple, yes? Now, the whole process that I explained to you is for one tone of black, one tone of dark. How many colors do you see here? You see black and white and 50 shades of gray, which means for every shade of gray, you have to have another depth of that well. So you start with the lighter tones because they are the shallowest one. You take it out of the acid bath and then you actually stop it with that tar, the resin and wax. You stop it because you don't want to further the depth of the well. And then you put it back again. For 50 shades of gray, well, you have to put it 50 times. Incredible amount of control you have to have over that medium, especially he did not have any precedent before that. He was actually that invented the chiaroscuro in the actual medium of etching. I mean, he's not an artist who invented etching. First known etching is in 1513. Even Albrecht Dürer tried etching, but he abandoned in frustration because he used wrong metal. But Rembrandt elevated it to the level that is still standard to this day. And there is a reason why he is still unsurpassed in his genius. He started it, he developed it, and he is the greatest etcher that I've ever lived. Look at this strong chiaroscuro that can we sense in this work of art. I want to show you how he was actually very prolific, prodigious self-portrait painter. I'm going to show you two of his etchings that actually he created of himself. I want to actually explain how they are completely different in its meaning. I already said as well that he painted the emotion with great empathy. Look at this portrait over here on the left. You're going to see he is confident in his destiny. Look at his eyes, self-assuring over here. He's not an artist. He's a bourgeois and a gentleman over here. You're going to see the finest quality. Look at the hat, compelling, compact, commanding. Now let's look at the one on the right side. Complete antithesis of what we just seen over here. There is a self-appraised and troubled look. Over here we can sense this. Over here this hat is nowhere close to this, and also the clothes almost the one of a beggar. Look at sagging cheeks over here. We see psychological distance, feel the physical presence and closeness. This is what he actually had ability to do. He was emotional destitute, social reckless, and he actually portrayed that in his artwork with great precision. That is his greatest legacy. He had the ability to paint an emotion that can be felt, not just seen. Now, I must show you something that is quite interesting that you can find in Raleigh, Raleigh, North Carolina. There are 8 plates, etching plates, that are given to Raleigh, North Carolina by Parkwest Gallery. We actually donated 8 plates in the Raleigh Museum worth many millions of dollars. This is a long-term loan by Parkwest Gallery and Albert Scaglione. I have a question. Do you want to know how those plates actually ended up in Raleigh? You want to know? I'm just going to tell you if you want to know. If you don't want to know, that's fine. I'm going to tell you if you want to know. All right, fantastic. We don't have a lot of time, and this is going to be, it's going to take me a moment to explain. Obviously, he passed away in 1669. He didn't have a dime to his name. Creditors took everything that he owned, a house, everything. He had a very large collection of artwork, costumes, curiosities. They took everything, obviously, because he lived an ostentation life well above his means. There are some scholars that believe they left etching plates to him, though I'm very dubious about that statement. If they took his home, obviously they took the etching plates. There are much more of them, the scholars I would say, that are inclined to go against it, that he actually hid that from them. Now, he created just over 300 etchings during his life, just over 300. Now, in 1668, there was a gentleman who was his attorney, and his name was actually Clement de Jong. He actually recorded taking those etching plates from him. Now, what happened during the next 50 years, a lot of these plates has actually disappeared, and 76 of them actually were recorded with the gentleman Clon Henry Waterley. He had it in 1767. He actually sold those plates to a gentleman by the name of Pierre-Francois Besson. Now, he was very important. He actually sold 78 plates to Pierre-Francois Besson. It was an art dealer. He had 5 plates in his possession. We don't know where he got it from, but there's 83 plates at this time, 1767, that are known of Rembrandt. We don't know where the rest, obviously war and famine, whatever happened, we still to this day, we don't know where they are. Maybe they will turn up somewhere in the future. So there's 83 plates known right now. So Pierre-Francois Besson, actually in his time, in 1786, he started to do a requie. Requie is actually impression of that plate. It's posthumous after his passing, but he would actually take those 83 plates and would pull requie of these 83 plates. A very small requie, because bear in mind, this is actually a little copper plate. You push through a high pressure printing press, it will wear off. So you need to be very careful what you're doing. He pulled a very small requie, and then he actually gave all of these plates to his son, Henri Louis Besson, who in 1797 also pulled a very small requie of these plates. However, nascently, inadvertently, he destroyed 5 of the plates in the process. I would use a stronger language. Obviously, I'm going to control myself. We have a young crowd over here, but I think, the loss is incalculable. Those plates are forever lost. He destroyed 5 of them. He had pulled that small requie, and then he actually sold the plates in 1810 to a gentleman called Auguste Jean. Auguste Jean now purchased 78 plates, and he actually also pulled a very small requie off the plates, and he had it in his possession to 1846. 1846, actually, Michael Bernard purchased those plates. He had it in his possession, did nothing with it until his passing, and then his widow actually sold those plates in 1906 to a gentleman called Alvin Beaumont. Now, Alvin Beaumont took 78 plates. He purchased them. He pulled a very small requie of those plates, and then he actually varnished the plates. He put a wax on them, varnished them, so no one would actually pull any requies of those plates. And he gave them to the Art Museum. He loaned it to the Art Museum, but he wanted to sell them to the Art Museum. And the actual curator of the Art Museum said, "We don't need that. We have oil paintings. We don't need the plates." So they actually declined to purchase. So he offered it on the marketplace. 1916, American doctor that lived in Paris, Dr. Robert Lee Humbert, actually purchased 78 plates in Paris, and he brought them to his hometown, Raleigh, North Carolina, and put them in a museum over there. They were there for decades. He passed away 1972, Robert Lee Humber. Now, they were there till 1990s. Now, the Riley Museum was actually getting restored, and the curator and people there, executives, they approached his family, his daughters, and they said to them, listen, we have those 78 plates that your father loaned to us. We will restore the museum right now. What do you want us to do with them? Do you want us to put it in the vault, or you maybe want to keep them for safekeeping? What do you want to do? And they said, excuse me, you said we own those plates? We'll take them, thank you very much. In 2 weeks, Artemis Gallery in London brokered a sale. Obviously, they sold all 78 plates to the market. Unfortunately, it was too big of a chunk for someone to go and purchase all 78 plates, so they were sold individually through highest bidders all around the world. Now, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Robert Light that was sent by another gentleman, an American, Howard Berger, sent him to London to locate 8 of the finest plates over there. They want to pull a millennium requiem, a millennium impression of these 8 plates. He took those plates, brought them back to the United States. Now, there was a challenge for them because there is varnish on those plates. They needed a master printmaker. They found one. His name is Dr. Emiliano Sorini, who was working for monarch of Spain. He was working for King of Spain. When someone would visit King of Spain, he would actually pull some of the master prints over there, and I would give to his guests as a gift. They actually recruited him. They said, listen, we would like to pull a millennium requiem, millennium impression of these 8 plates. He said, all right, we have a lot of work to do because there's varnish on top of them. Well, how many impressions would you like to do? They said 2,500 of each plate. He said, no way, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be involved in this. I don't want to be remembered in art history as an idiot who destroyed 8 of the Rembrandt plates, obviously. So he said he's not going to do it. Then they found an idea. They found a way to actually create a steel face onto the plate that will actually not be connected to the plate. Very specific, sophisticated magnets would be actually placed into the grooves of the actual plate, and it can be inked. They agreed upon it. They're going to do it. They started to do Millennium Requiem. Now, in 90s, obviously, they needed a marketplace for these. You have 2,500, 8 plates. What you going to do? They actually approached Albert Scaglione, founder and owner of Parkwest Gallery. They said, listen, we are actually doing the Millennium Requiem. We would like to ask you, you want to partake in the project? And he said, no, I do not want to partake in a project. I want to purchase the whole thing. He purchased the project, the rights of the plates, the impressions. He purchased the whole thing. And then, obviously, when they were finished, in 2000s, you had those actually artworks coming out on the ships. I don't know if anyone's seen those before, have that Millennium Edition actually coming out. Now, unfortunately, Emiliano Sorini has passed away. Marjorie van Dyck, she was his pupil, she finished the whole project. It was a very labor-intense process. Now, when they were finished with all that, well, Albert actually said, okay, what we're going to do with the plates? And he approached the curator of Riley Museum, and he said, listen, we have those plates. They were there for decades. I think you're right for an owner. We can actually do a long-term loan of those plates in your museum if you want them. He said, of course I want them, but I want it in the original copper form. So it took Marjorie van Dyck 4 years to unseal those plates. It took her 6 months for one plate, 4 years actually to move that steel facing, and then there was 8 plates were actually given to Raleigh, Carolina on loan. It's a long-term loan, and they're standing there right now in Raleigh, Carolina, ladies and gentlemen, with the impression of each of the plates. Quite fascinating story, I must say, how Albert and Parkwest Gallery actually piggyback on art history, and they made a mark, indelible mark in history of Requiem of Rembrandt and Ryan, which is something that I take immense pride. I'm going to be talking about the second artist over here. We must talk about, he recognized only 3 authorities. Francisco Goya y Lucientes, one of the greatest Spanish artists in the world of art. 3 authorities, he said, God, Rembrandt, and Diego Velázquez. Those are the three authorities that we recognize. He was born in 1746, passed away 1828. He actually lived quite a long life, considering everything. Now, he was the first satirist of his time. He was actually attacking nobility, he was ridiculing clergy, and he would deflate intellectual and social pretentiousness wherever he could find it. Now, if you think about this, in 1700s, if you ridicule the nobility, higher crust of society, what would happen to you? People have died for a lot less in those days. But he could actually do that because he was close and personal friend with a king, which this painting can attest to that fact. This is actually a royal painting that Francisco Goya did, of an entire royal family. But if you look closely in the background, Francisco Goya placed himself actually working on a canvas. It would be completely out of the bounds of courtly propriety to have a working artist in the same physical space as the royal family. He had the audacity, he had the gall, and he actually did that. And the king didn't mind because it was his friend. Now, he actually had a precedent for it. Diego Velázquez painted Las Meninas. Now, he was also a very close friend of the king. Now, what you're going to see, now this was frowned upon, but it was kind of accepted. He placed himself over here, the princess is over here, and obviously the maids and everything, and the king and queen are painted in reflection in the mirror. That was kind of accepted, but the actual being in a physical space with a working artist, it was completely out of the bounds of the courtly propriety. But he had the ability to do that because he was Francisco Goya. I want to point out, show you his magnum opus, his opera prima, the greatest work of art that he created, and actually hangs in a Prado museum still today. And this one is called May 3rd, 1808. Now, it actually was a depiction of the tragical events that happened on May 3rd, 1808, when Napoleon sent soldiers in Madrid. They shot 1,500 people one day. Francisco Goya was so dismayed by this gruesome act that he painted it. It was a social commentary of the events of the world. If you look at this painting, he spares us nothing. Spares us nothing. We see everything. We can sense the anguish, fervor of people actually physically in pain and fear. You're going to see this. There is over here a dead, a pile over here. There's blood over here. There's actually a portion of the brain hanging out of the actual head. You're going to see compositional core. The focal point is the Savior. One man actually surrendered himself to save others. If you look at the pose, actually resembles much on the pose of Christ, obviously, and he has a white shirt, which is opposite of everyone else. The murder, the killers, they have no face. There's no identity over here. They're just killers. If you look in the background, there's no stars on the sky. Obviously, there's going to be church in the background. The God has left for this place. That's what it means over here. Now, though reluctantly we must move on, but I want to paint a contrast. Obviously, in those days, artists would create paintings that will glorify war. He wanted to show a realistic depiction of what is actually happening. There's certain things, certain moments in war that should be glorified, like heroic deeds, but war itself should not be glorified. I'll give an example. At the same time, Jacques-Louis David, who was a great neoclassical artist, he would actually paint Napoleon on the Mount Stallion, obviously glorifying war. Just something on a side note, if you look closely at this painting, Napoleon was a very short man. Obviously, he's too big for this horse. That's first thing. Second, it looks like he actually is going to jump over the Alps in one go. And if we know a little bit about history, he actually traversed it on a mule. But anyway, that aside, he wanted to actually show the realistic depiction of the monstrosities of war. And he actually did this in etched form. Now, many great artists in the history of the world, if they want to be remembered in pantheon of great art, they needed to know how to etch, because you're going to be directly compared with Rembrandt. Now, I'm curious, what do you think? If your name is compared against Rembrandt and you're an artist, is that kind of a good thing? What do you think? You better believe it is. So he actually created two suites. One is called Las Caprichas. He did this in actually 1798. It was also a way of satire. He would ridicule the society and clergy. But his magnum opus was in 1810. It's called Disasters of War, that we can see in this slide. Very graphic, I should say. It was an emblematic pictorialization of human weaknesses and how inhumane we became. Never ever a story of man and humanity to a man was so compellingly being told. Every episode reported with utmost compassion and pity and respect. He created about 80 of his finest etchings over here. There's an admirable balance between light and dark, tone and line, and his shrewd ability to compress the composition is so readily apparent. It was his magnum opus in etched form. He was a tour de force after that. I must say, he was stone deaf. 5 years before he started to do Las Caprichas, he had an illness that actually deprived him of his hearing. Now, because of that, he actually understands the incongruency of the world better. Because obviously, if I say to you, for example, I'm never going to do this again, you trust my words or you trust my face? You trust my face. So he actually understood people better, and actually that furthered his creative and decorative and expressive potential over here. Now, something that Picasso, which we will discuss shortly, said, I wish to achieve the same rich velvety black in my etching as Rembrandt. Every great artist wants to be compared with Rembrandt. At the latter portion of his life, obviously, he actually painted a romanticism. Over here you're going to see Dr. Arrieta, which is a good doctor that attended him and his illness. Obviously, he painted a great portrait. That was a year before he has passed away. Look at the emotion that we can sense in this artwork. He had the ability, also like Rembrandt, to understand the human emotion and foibles and to paint him with great precision. Now, this is something that I actually overseen over here. I've actually placed an artwork that should not be over here. The last time I did this lecture, we were going to Hermitage Museum. This is an artwork that I actually located in the Hermitage Museum. They only have one Francisco Goya, excuse me, pardon this intrusion, that's me. They only have one Francisco Goya painting in Hermitage Museum, believe it or not. They have a plethora of Rembrandts, Rubens, they have 2 Leonardo da Vinci's, 1 Michelangelo, and 1 Francisco Goya, which attests to the fact of the scarcity of his paintings, I must say. Now, I'm going to discuss a third artist over here. Now, I want to ask you a question. Does anyone know who this artist, who is the artist that painted this composition? I will give you a suggestion, a hint. He also painted this composition.
Oh my gosh.
That is correct. Pablo Picasso, ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest artists in the history of mankind. There is so many things that we can say about this artist. Obviously, we'll have to rigorously edit this to a few sentences over here, obviously, because he had an incessant and vehement desire, and he painted day in, day in and out. Obviously, all his life was all about painting. Now, I must say, born in 1881, passed away in 1973. He lived a long life, full life. He painted his entire life. Now, I must say, he was still born when he actually got out of the mother's womb. He was stillborn. He was dead. Now, his uncle, who was a physician, he was actually walking back and forth, did not know how to help young Pablo Picasso. In a last attempt to save this boy's life, he took a big puff of a cigar that he had in his hand and actually blew it in his mouth. The boy started to cough. It was alive. Because of that, his full name was given exactly as the name of his uncle, but listen to his uncle's name, or in his name. It's actually full name. It's Pablo Diego José Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno María de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Martir Patricio Clito Ruiz y Picasso. That is his full name. That was his actual mother's brother, the gentleman that saved his life. Now, they said that his talent was unprecedented and unsurpassed. His father was a pigeon painter. He would paint doves and pigeons. He was a mediocre painter. One must be noted there. He was also a professor. He was teaching children in school how to paint. Now, this is a story that Pablo Picasso had shared for many years, though they thought a lot of himself, I'm sure there's a lot of merit and truth to the story. One day he walked in a room where he saw a painting that his father actually began. He didn't like the feat, and he actually worked it in his own manner. When his father entered the room, he was in such awe that feet looked much better than he actually created them first. He took brushes and gave that to his son. He proclaimed he's never going to paint again because his son already surpassed him. Oh, I neglect to share with you, that was when Pablo Picasso was 4 years old, according to Pablo Picasso. Now this is a work of art that actually is called First Communion. It's a picturization of his sister. Now, there's something actually quite interesting. There's his other sister that passed away. He actually prayed to the God when he was very young. He prayed to the God. His sister actually had an illness, very debilitating illness. It was in the latter portion of that illness. He prayed to God. He said, God, save my sister. Never going to paint in my life if you do that. Unfortunately, she passed away. It's a catch-22. Obviously, people in those days, they meant if they pray to God and say, save my sister, I'm going to do something, well, they will do it. She passed away, continued to paint. Now, he actually created this painting. He was 14 years old. It was actually a painting that he did for admittance into the college. He went to the university at the age of 14. They gave him 1 month to paint a painting. What do you think how long it took? Young Pablo Picasso of 14 years old. This is a quite large composition. This size over here, I would say, like 6-7 feet. What do you think? Guess.
3 days.
A day. Painted it in a day. Over here you're going to see 1896. Not even 15 years old. He painted it in a day. He was a brilliant, he could paint like Raphael. Actually, he was very modest. He said, when I was 9, I could paint like Raphael. It took me a lifetime to paint that as a child, which I will explain, obviously, as we move along. There is a lot of these stories that actually Pablo Picasso would say. For example, he painted everything with checks. I don't know if you know the story. Everywhere he would go, he was very famous, obviously the most wealthy artist ever lived. He would go and paint everything with checks. He would say, okay, I'm going to take this kitchen, I'm going to take this furniture and all that stuff. He would pay with a check because he knew no one would cash in the check. And because of his signature, obviously. So he would get everything for free. He said, his mother told him, if you want to become a priest, become a pope. If you want to become a soldier, become a general. If you want to become an artist, become Pablo Picasso. He thought lightly of himself. Now, there's many things that we can say about him, but this is the way I'm actually going to present life and art of Pablo Picasso. He had many women in his life. He actually he was endowed, at least he thought so, with a gift given by God, and as a deity, he should have had a lot of women in his life, and he did. And he painted him as he would actually go through life, because he didn't divide private and professional. Everything that happened in his life was actually end up on a canvas or in any artistic form. I will show you a few examples how it actually that progressed. He would paint him as he would feel for that. So I will show you. This is Olga in Rose Spirit, where he was in love. There's obviously a beautiful color palette that we can see. This is at the end of the relationship. We see Olga emaciated, gruesome forms over here. And this is how he would paint her. Over here you're going to see as well. This is Marie-Therese Walter when he was actually in love with her. And then over here you're going to see at the end of it, this is obviously with a phallic symbol that we can see over here. Now I must say, this painting is called La Rêve. Give me a moment, I want to explain this, because this is one of the most famous paintings in the history of the world. Now Sally and Peter Gans actually bought this painting in 50s for $7,000, which was quite a lot of money even back then. They bought it for $7,000 and they had it until their passing. Then when they passed away, Steve Wynn, we know Wynn has Wynn Resorts, all those hotels. He built half of Las Vegas. He purchased the painting. He loved that painting. He was a great art collector. He purchased it for quite a bit of money. I think the price was about $80 million, somewhere along those lines. He actually had it in his possession for quite some time, and he decided he's going to sell the artwork. He brokered a sale with Stephen A. Cohen, who agreed that it's going to pay $119 million for a painting, which at the time would be the highest recording selling price for a painting. Now Steve Wynn, I don't know if you know this, he has a debilitating illness that deprives him from peripheral vision. He doesn't see very well. I actually had it written down, I forgot its very specific name of that illness. Now, he was joyous, carousing around the painting. Obviously, they shook hands, $119 million. By chance, by accident, he poked an elbow into the painting and actually created a hole the size of the golf ball. He said, that's a sign of God, I'm not going to sell it. The deal was off the table. Then the painting actually went through a series of restoration. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent. And a few years after, he decided he's going to sell the painting. Stephen A. Cohen came about, same man that agreed $119 million, he purchased it for $135 million with a significant increase of price even after it was destroyed. Now that's power of art, and that's power of Pablo Picasso's art. Oh, you're going to see Dora Maar, when he was in love with her, actually painted with warm, beautiful color tones, with beautiful lines over here. Obviously, we see complete opposite. Also, what you're going to see in his artwork, obviously, he would create style according to how he actually would feel. We would actually travel from Barcelona to Paris with a great friend, Casagimas. Casagimas, as young people were at the time, he was addicted to opium and drinks and beverages, and he was also in love with the prostitute. Well, that love was never reciprocated because one day he was very, very inebriated. He went to the cafe, took a pistol, he wanted to shoot the prostitute. He missed her, luckily, and then when he realized what he did, he actually shot himself in the head in front of Pablo Picasso. He was devastated and distraught and depressed, and he actually started his blue period. Blue was evocation of sorrow in his artwork. Obviously, a very short span. This is actually Casagimas, his friend. He's paid homage to him. Then, obviously, as he matured, he progressed. It was more cheerful. Rose period actually began. I want to show you this actually. This is Garçon à la Pipe, Boy with a Pipe, obviously, sold in 2004 for $104 million. Not only cubistic works of art that coveted of Pablo Picasso, all of these early works of art as well. Incredibly, incredibly coveted in his artwork. And then he had his magnum opus, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This is an artwork that it took him 800 sketches and studies before he created this fantastic work of art. It was the first cubistic artwork ever. It was influenced by tribal masks and ladies of the night. Obviously, there was a brothel house in Barcelona called Avignon, and then he actually painted ladies of the night with a tribal mask, and Cubism was born. He and George Braque actually started with Cubism. Now, Cubism is something that was misunderstood from a get-go. However, it was well accepted after a few years, and they thought there's never going to be a greater artistic movement in history after that fact. But Pablo Picasso, he wanted to be remembered as the greatest of them all, and he knew he cannot stay trapped in Cubism. He would go back and paint in Cubism sometimes, but he would evolve, he would advance, and actually he started to do neoclassicism over here, which we can see focused on shape and form and actually line, which was his subject matter. People were outraged. He would receive death threats of people that was actually, they were enamored by Cubism. And how dare he actually abandon Cubism after he invented it with George Braque. Though reluctantly, as I already noted, we can talk about Pablo Picasso for hours. I will tell you that he, as many great artists in the history of the world, if they want to be remembered in pantheon of great art, they needed to know how to etch, and he etched fervently. He created the greatest graphic achievement of 20th century. It's called Les Suites of Vollard. Now, Vollard, Ambrose Vollard, was one of the greatest art dealers in the history of mankind, unequivocally of 20th century. He actually did instigate Pablo to create the greatest graphic achievement of 20th century, considered by most. Now, Pablo Picasso was a great avid art collector. He actually walked in the studio of Vollard one day. He saw a Renoir and Cézanne painting that he coveted much. He wanted them. He said, I want these paintings. How much money do you want? He said, I'm not going to sell you these paintings. Pablo retorted, how do you mean you're not going to sell it? You're an art dealer, I want to buy this. I would like to have those paintings. Ambrose, who was a very smart business person, he said, listen, I will give you those paintings, but I want you to create 100 of your finest etchings for me. Pablo was thinking a little bit about it. He said, all right, I'm going to do this. He created 100 of the finest etchings over there. It took him 6 years. Well, when he was finished, obviously, the requests, the impressions, they started to pull. There was a time for signing those obvious impressions. Well, Pablo Picasso was also a very intelligent, sneaky person as well, a little bit. He said, wait a minute, we talked about the etching clays. We never talk about signing them. If you want me to sign, you will pay for every signature. Obviously, so he would actually bring the artworks as they would sell them, and he would sign them. The thing is, what happened, Ambrose Vollard actually got involved in a car crash. A work of art hit him in the back of his head, and he has passed away. He lived and died by the art. But what happened is, unfortunately, what happened is most of the suite left unsigned. That's the actual calamity, one would say. For art collectors, obviously, that makes a lot of difference, because if you have a signature, that's a big difference. But for the museums, it doesn't have a big difference, because they are actually focused more on the creative process. So museums are collecting the ones that are unsigned. Collectors like to have the ones that are signed, because obviously Pablo Picasso's signature, well, that gives a little bit extra zest. I'll give you one story. Pablo Picasso, he shared a story, by the way. He actually went to a restaurant with a large group of people, and he was going to buy them dinner. Well, after the dinner was finished, he actually asked for a waiter to bring the owner around, and he took a napkin, and he actually drew a dove on the napkin, and he said to him, there we go, I think this will take care of the dinner. Well, the owner came about and said, excuse me, Monsieur Picasso, but there's no signature. Pablo Picasso said, I thought I'm buying a dinner, not a restaurant. Obviously, he thought a lot of himself. I will tell you for a fact, he received a villa in Nice, in Côte d'Azur, villa in Nice. Even back in those days, they were coveted with one painting. He gave one painting away to a person that actually gave them in the exchange a villa. And I think this person actually he had a better deal with the painting, that's for sure. I want to show you actually some of the unsigned etchings are very coveted. This one, just shy of $1 million, unsigned. We're going to see this is incredibly elaborate design. We can see he was a master etcher, because he wanted to be remembered and compared with Rembrandt. Over here you're going to see there's one also unsigned that was sold for over $1 million. Now, what I'm going to say, obviously, in 1968, in the latter portion of his life, in the very advanced stage of his life, he actually wanted to be compared with Rembrandt in one respect as well. As I shared with you, Rembrandt did about 300 etchings during his entire life. Pablo Picasso went on a mission. In a span of 8 months, he created 347. Obviously, was that a coincidence? Absolutely not. He wanted to rival great Rembrandt. He paid homage to him in many different respects. Many artworks actually are named Rembrandt as well. He created a visual diary of his life. Piero and Aldo Kromelik, who were his printers, they worked with him. They said he worked incessantly. The masters from the past would actually be very jealous on him because he worked with such ease. Very, very fluid and flowing work he did over there. Some of the actual 347 series housed in one of the greatest museums in the world. Is one of the name of a few over here that you can see. They are incredibly coveted. The etchings, because the thing is, paintings, first of all, paintings are very expensive, and all very great paintings are already in museums. So what's the next thing? Well, museums, they want to actually create and collect those etchings as well, because it shows his creative oeuvre. Now, actually, I went to the Museum of Pablo Picasso in Malaga in Spain. He was born in Malaga. There I actually found over there. Now, if you ever go in Malaga, please don't take any photos, or at least don't tell them that I took any photos, because they are like a photo police. They are very serious about this. I got myself a little bit of pickle with these photos. But anyway, what I found over there is the wall. They explain the etching process. You're going to see the tools that one would use in the etching process. But this is a Pablo Picasso museum. Over here you're going to see two greatest etchers that have ever lived and influenced Pablo Picasso. Over here you're going to see Rembrandt, and over here you're going to see Francisco Goya.